Welcome back to Inspired or Acquired. This is the podcast where we talk to real business owners, talk real numbers, and ask them whether or not they would sell their business. We have a really interesting episode today. We're joined by Marc Hawk from RevLocal and now RevLocal / Hibu. We're going to talk about their recent merger and acquisition. And this should be a really fun conversation just in terms of how it happened, why it came up, and what they've learned in the process so far. So I'm joined by my co-host, Clint Fiore, business broker out of Texas. And Marc Hawk is joining us from Central Ohio. So Marc, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you, Patrick. Clint, it's great to be on with you guys.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
For folks who don't know, give us a little background on like what type of business RevLocal is and how it got started and what you do.
So RevLocal is a digital marketing business for small business owners. If you think about RevLocal, think about GM, Google My Business and showing up on the maps, when you're trying to make sure the clients around your business find you and know what you do and know what your hours are. And that's really how RevLocal started. RevLocal means the revolution of local search, which we started 14 years ago to try to help business owners figure out how to make sure they were being successful in an online world. And so 14 years later, we're still trying to do that better and better with all the different ways that business owners reach the customers that they need, prospects, turning them into customers. And as we like to say, gain and retain customers was our job in the digital marketing space.
Okay, awesome. 14-year run so far. So I was there the first 7 years, I guess the first half.
The hardest 7 years, Patrick.
Yeah.
You helped us build it from the beginning.
Yeah. We pushed it pretty good. So during that time, can you just give us a general sense of like maybe how many customers or ballpark revenue, how many employees it got up to?
We grew from a startup mode. Patrick, you literally were the first real salesperson we had. We had a couple of 3 salespeople. We tried to work with great people, but just wasn't the fit. And Patrick, you really helped us build a sales team to really reach the market and test it and rewrite the sales pitch multiple times. So Patrick, you're very good at that. But as we worked through that, we grew from startup. There's 4 or 5 of us. Used to be a dial-up business. So the business was private in the sense we had funding from our ownership and our founders had a past success. And we took that into the RevLocal business. And by the time we decided to merge in with Hibu, we were at about 400 employees and over 115, 120 salespeople in 40 states around the U.S. So customer-wise, you mentioned, between 7,000 and 10,000 customers, depending on how you count them, and doing digital marketing on a recurring monthly basis for those. And so with that many salespeople, had a lot of folks providing out of Central Ohio the digital marketing services to those business owners every month to make sure that they could stay successful in the online space.
Got it. Awesome background. Well, congratulations on the growth and congrats on the successful merger or exit. So, Clint, do you have any questions up to this point so far?
No, I mean, it's a fascinating story. I'm excited to jump into, the thought process of the last, year or two. I know that you've been approached by private equity and all these people, and you're growing and you're thriving, in your business. And at some point, you answer the call of Hibu, and so like, what was the thought process that opened the door for you to even entertain that conversation? Because so many successful growing business owners that are one of the top ones in their niche, they get approached all the time. And it's like you're just inundated with people coming after you, and you have to kind of just tone them out and focus on what you're doing. But at some point, like, what was the chink in your armor, or what was the thing that said, you know what, I'm gonna enter this conversation, sign some NDAs, and start talking to these folks?
Well, I would say, first of all, that if you have a small business or any business, I'm maybe a little bit different than some that my brother Michael and I have had. He's had a dozen businesses. This is probably the 12th, and the 13th is a different one now. And so I've done probably half of those with him. Mm-hmm. And when you start a business, you have to understand that if you aren't willing to sell, if you aren't building it to sell, it's like buying a house. You got to keep in mind that you're going to someday sell that house, most likely. If you think that's your forever house and you're 25 years old, that's just not realistic. And some people get that mindset and they buy in places, or they don't pay attention to how it will resell 3 years, 5 years, 7 years down the road. When we started RevLocal, we always had the mindset that this is probably a business that we'll someday consider selling. And so we always had an open mind to it. And as we had success, and Patrick, with you being along the journey, when we started to get traction, we often asked ourselves, what is the get off point? Because a lot of times when you're a founder, all of us were taking pay cuts. All of us were making less than what our salespeople were. We were all saying, well, there's got to be an exit someday because it's not worth it if it never happens. That's the way we thought then. But then as time went on, the question became for our leadership team, what are the reasons why we would sell? And what are the reasons why we would take investment? And so we did both, because partway through the journey, we decided to take investors. And that was 4 years in. I think, Patrick, you probably remember that, where we took some investment to keep the growth going. And then a couple of years later, we took another investor. So we had a couple small investors, minority. We were always at 80% control and ownership because we didn't want to be forced to do something. So we always still had the ability to decide whether or not we needed to sell, which is always a warning for people when you're watching Shark Tank. Don't sell 50% of your business. You're giving up your control. And so we were able to keep that strength of ownership and the equity for as long as we possibly could. But when we talked about it, we used to say, and it really became true, there are 3 reasons why you would sell a business. Number 1, stupid money comes along. It's worth more to them than it is to you, and you just can't say no. Mm-hmm. Number 2, you see a train coming and other people don't see it. Or number 3, you're just tired or you're done with it. Because I think for a lot of business owners, any one of those can happen.
A train or a train that's going to run you over?
A train that's going to run you over. Like it's coming on the tracks and you see it and other people don't see that train coming. And, hopefully you can reroute that train most of the time and get on a different track. But if you see it coming and it's coming for you, that's the dial-up business that we were in. That train was coming and there was no getting away from it because dial-up was going down on high speed. So economically and in the business world, it's a competitive landscape. So you got to pay attention to those. So when we think about when we decided to actually listen to a strategic partnership in Hibu, it was a 7-year journey. It was not something we've talked about. I met the leadership there 7 years ago.
Gotcha.
And so part of my mentality was, you don't know who it's going to be, but it's an attitude of abundance. There's plenty of opportunity and you don't need to try to hide everything about what you're doing. Execution's the challenge. It's not the idea of what we're doing. It's not our secret sauce that's the key. It's our execution. So I was a very open-minded leader to try to say, well, I don't know who we might partner with, but if there's ever an opportunity, make sure you know them. And that's kind of how this came to pass, is eventually we got to the point where we're talking to each other as leaders and saying, would we be better off putting these together for both of us? And I think there's a lot of layers to that we can get into. But at the end of the day, what opened it up was I started to realize this would probably be better together than it would be apart. 2 + 2 is 5. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, then far be it for me to hold on until I'm ready to retire, or to hold on until I get the value that I think it could really be worth, because we didn't sell it trying to maximize the number. We sold it trying to be good stewards to say, is this the right time, not just for us, but also for people who've invested and for people who work here, and most importantly, for the customers we serve. So those constituents are always in our minds. Are we creating the right value for clients? Are we creating the right opportunity for people? And is it going to be better or worse if we do this? And that certainly took a little while to validate if that was true or not, but that was the hypothesis we went into it with.
Hey guys, wanted to take a quick break from the show just to tell you about our companies for a second. I'm Patrick Dichter and I own Appletree Business Services. We do quality accounting and tax nationwide. So if you're running a business or looking to buy a business, we'd love to help you out with accounting and tax services. You can find us at appletreebusiness.com. And Clint, tell us about Bison Business.
Yeah, Bison Business is my firm. We do nationwide M&A. So we help people buy and sell companies. Most of our customers have companies in the 1 to 20 million revenue range, profitable businesses. So if you've got one and you're ready to get acquired, you can reach out to us at bisonbusiness.com for a complimentary evaluation. We can get you to market and get you sold. If you're a listener that's a buyer that wants to buy a company that size, make sure you're on our email list, because we'll send you out deals first before they hit the market anywhere else. But we'd love to serve you anytime you're thinking of acquiring or selling your business. We want to be your first stop at Bison Business.
Awesome. Now back to the show. What are some of those synergies? I mean, in my mind, I think of some of the competitors along the way. I remember RevLocal back in the day, like they led with pay-per-click. They'd sell a little bit bigger customer. There was Yodel, who would, sell to doctors and lawyers, higher price point, mainly selling trade shows. There were some people that sold inbound. There were some people that sold like small ticket channel partners like Yext. And then I thought of us as like, we'd go knock on the doors in person, and kind of that 300 a month to 3,000 per month, like
Yes.
sweet spot. Were they in the same
Yes.
price point and the same acquisition strategy, or what did that look like?
Well, when I say that I maintained relationships, I tried to qualify them to say, do they look at the market the same way, Patrick? You just described it well. Like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with somebody who looks at it totally different, but they're just doing inbound, or they want to only do lawyers, or they're only going to do, enterprise/brand or something. And so what was unique about us is the two of us were the largest in the space, and we both had the same go-to-market strategy. We believed that knocking on the door of a business owner and creating a personal relationship with them so that they understood what to buy and that they had a relationship with someone they could trust was the key to the success. And so we stayed with that, and they also evolved their approach to that alongside us. So they were bigger than us doing it, and certainly evolved a lot over the years that I knew them. But as we came to the conclusion that we're both trying to do this, we're really redundantly spending money trying to make it better. And if you stop doing that, the synergy is we're not both trying to spend money to improve the tech and do all the things that are required in the marketing space to keep up. Is you can synergize that and then bring the teams together. And so the great news for us was this was really an important part of our decision, is that this is somebody who's also going to care for the people. This was not a situation where we were going to lose a whole bunch of our staff and put them out, on the street. Certainly there are a few, and for those, if you're that one person, it's 100% a problem, right? Because you got your position eliminated, but out of 400, there were 20. And so we had a couple of months in where we did that, and those people were treated with integrity and respect like we tried to do. And so they had the same philosophy that we're trying to do best by the business and by the individual. So that made it make sense, Patrick, from the perspective of they went to the market the same way with a similar product set. It's different because they package it a little different, but it's not very different at all. And the price points are very similar. So for many of our clients, the conversions we've had from clients going over have been an increase and an up opportunity because they have more product than what I have. So we're trying to catch up to a bigger product suite and a way of doing business. And so that really enables it to be stronger for the customers we're trying to serve. So that helped us, be confident that we were doing right by our customers too.
I would think for any acquirer merger, like how many sales reps were there at the time?
For us, about 115, 120.
115 of like dogs, outbound killers. Like there's a ton of value on that,
There is. If you go to market that way, Patrick. But if you go to another strategic partner somewhere down the road, if you let yourself get to the point where you have to do something, you don't always get to choose what kind of partner you have.
Right.
And that's the thing I would say to any other business owner is you have to almost anticipate, even if you're not ready. If you wait too long, you can be in a position where they're going to carve you up. They're going to take your tech. They're going to take your, portions of your business for their own value. And then what's left is often why people hate mergers, because there's so much carnage. And so for us, we were looking for that ideal partner to really take the service of the same clients, not cutting out a bunch of clients and saying we don't serve them anymore, or cutting out people and say we don't need you anymore, but that you can bring two together and, keep the scaling and the growth happening together. That's the vision of this merger, and it's been true so far.
Some good words of wisdom there. I liked how you said, the 3 reasons to sell are stupid money, a train's coming, or you're just tired and done. But then when you described why you sold, you didn't really key in on any of those 3. I felt like you were walking around it, tiptoeing around a little bit. Was there anything about like a train's coming with these guys, or is they bigger than you? They were kind of in your space. They were making smart moves. Like, was any of this kind of like strategic in terms of like, you know what, we better join them, like, do you have any analogy for that or thoughts on it?
We talk about it, and when we were discussing it, and I know the folks who we partner with, our recognition is that it was probably 2 out of the 3.
Mm-hmm.
It was, when I say it, it's a nice, way to frame it, but it's often not going to be as simple and clear as that.
Yeah.
And I think it was a little bit of 2 out of the 3. It definitely wasn't stupid money.
Mm-hmm.
If we wanted stupid money, or we wanted to maximize the value for the ownership, which is part of the constituency, we could have potentially hung in there longer, fought longer, waited on the market to shift. Like private equity and the investors, this is not the greatest time in the world for the valuations to come down, not up. And so you're constantly trying to weigh the overall market as well as the individual opportunities. But the reality of it is, when we evaluated this opportunity and the partnership, it has a lot to do with when the buyer wants to buy.
Mm-hmm.
You can want to sell. That doesn't mean there's anyone who's interested in buying right now. And so we were a little bit subject to the reality of, when you think about the train, that's you're in danger. I don't know that I would say that, but the danger is that there may not be other folks who are going to come along on that track saying you want to jump on.
That makes sense.
And so if that comes along, and then the piece of the train that I would say, the other analogy with that is, if they get really aggressive with 2 of your competitors, what happens to you?
Mm-hmm.
Game gets harder. That was possible. Not known for sure, but possible. And so, as business owners, we have to understand and not get too emotional, but get strategic to say, if I say no to this, am I better off or worse off? You don't always know. It plays itself out over time. But in our evaluation and in our view, it was all of the things. And there is an element of the third one, which I mentioned, like, you're getting tired of it. We've been at 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when folks invested 10 years ago, Patrick, like what that looks like, often 5 to 7, you start to get to 10, like, are you guys going to ever sell this? Our money's been parked with you for a while. You're going to buy me out? We didn't have any pressure from those partners. We chose them because we didn't think that pressure would come, but we also felt obligated to fulfill promises. And so, I would say, Clint, that part of it, just to kind of wrap this, is, in my own view, there were promises that were made that I didn't want to never be able to fulfill. So if I had a chance to fulfill them, it was a good opportunity.
Okay. I don't know anything about your personal life or your personal story here. I wanted to just ask, because I believe business is personal, and part of this factors from your family and your timing of your personal life can come into this. Was there anything about that? Like, I wanted to know, just kind of like, have you had a large exit before, or was this your first time? Do you have a family? Were they nudging you one direction or another on this? Like, how did your personal life factor into this?
And none of it was financially motivated. We've been blessed. We've had successful businesses. So it's really just a matter of, do you maximize the win or not? So it was not really ever financial, but I would say, in my own personal life, I'm turning 55 with the last child, graduated a year ago, grandkids in another state. Yeah, that has something to do with it. We know we're not going to do it forever. I'm in my mid 50s. Do I want to quit working? No. Am I going to go sit on the beach? No. But at the same time, this particular business is at a point where it's healthy and it's strong and there's interested opportunities. So it may be a little bit early, but yet that is part of it, that there's going to need to be a plan for someday, even if it's a little earlier than you expect. And so it's not just me, there's a group of us. And I would say certainly my brother Michael and I, we've been partners from the beginning. Both of us, discerned it together for a few months, and even our executive team, to say, is this the time that's best for what we all did together? Because when we started this, there were other folks who have equity and have ownership. And if I failed to ever give them that exit after they made such deep sacrifices in the first 5 years, I would have felt like a failure. And so for some of it, I would say, Clint, it is a matter for me feeling like we actually fulfilled the mission we had, which is to build a great business and enable people to have a great life and to be able to enjoy the rest of their life. And so, yeah, some others are probably a little disappointed. It wasn't a bigger exit that they could stop working, but it was a good outcome for those people who built this.
And you just are becoming empty nesters? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
I'm trying to be a complete empty nester.
You're almost
age-wise, I'm an empty nester, but I still got to get one out. And my last name's Hawk.
The payroll.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a hawk. I just need to push one out and hope she can fly.
All right. Well, you're almost there, it sounds like. I wanted to highlight that because I know it may be coincidental, it may not be, but I think there's a perception out there, especially in some generations that think like the only reason to sell is when I'm done, when I'm just ready to retire. But like me as an M&A advisor in this space, like we do a lot of deals for folks in their 50s. And it's for people that are a long way. They still have tons of energy. They still want to keep working. They're not ready to retire. They're not done. But there's something about like, man, I got all my kids through. A lot of times it's either out of the house or it's through college. Yeah. And there's this kind of like sense of my life's about to totally be different. And I'm open-minded now to a change. And for the first time ever, I feel like I could move, I could do something else. And if I'm ever going to do something else, like now's the time because I still could do something new for 10, 15 years. And so like, there's this tremendous openness that seems to sweep over people when they're like right at the empty nest phase. And so I like to tell, buyers to not just focus on the 70-year-old seller, but like there's a lot of really good opportunities with 50-something-year-olds that say, you could get them into their second act or get them into, a part-time situation and let them work alongside you for a while during a transition. So I think it's a great time buying a business from someone in their 50s, as long as they've got a good business and a good reason for sell. It can be one of the best timings. Do you agree with that?
Clint, I totally agree with it. And I think, like in my situation, I'm still working with the company. Like it's just not exit and, hey, good luck to you. Let's integrate this. Let's do a good job. Let's make sure this business, what you think you're going to get, and let's make sure it's a win for you and for me. My dad always taught me good business deals are win-wins, they're not win-losses. And I think sometimes in deal making, we try to win and maximize and feel like we got one over on the other person. But what I would say about that is when you're in your 50s and when you're a business owner coming up into the 50s is just to have the same mentality as if you're successful as a business owner, you have to always be reflective about what do I need to do now? Because you're the one that has to decide, right? What's the new initiative? What do we need to invest in? What do we need to stop doing on the stop doing list? And all these principles that we learn to be successful still apply through the exit. You're not running to an exit, you're running through it. And through it means that you're anticipating what's going to happen afterwards. You're anticipating what would happen if you didn't. And so that constant self-reflection and honesty with yourself, like, are we better off doing this, and trying to keep the emotion out of it? And to me, that's hard for some solopreneurs, but when you have a team around you, it's easier to do. And that's the blessing I had, to discern that with people, not just alone.
I want to talk about the deal itself just a little bit, maybe not the specifics, but just the timing of it. And did you run a process with a banker, or did you just DIY this with your internal team? Or like, what did your deal team look like, and what was your process like?
I would never trust myself to do it alone. With people who are professionals and they do it for a living, we're going to definitely always try to bring that into. So we had a banker. When, for our sake, we were CEO to CEO, we developed the opportunity together. We did not put ourselves specifically on the market and run a highly competitive process. We had done that in the past. So one of the things that we do behind the scenes is always test ourselves to see what the market is saying. So over the last 5 years, we always knew. So a couple different times we would bring bankers in, let them take a look, tell us what they thought, tell us what they knew the landscape was, because you can't see what you can't see. you think you know the market, and then all of a sudden there's a couple other providers that you don't ever see. They're in another part of the country that are doing great things and growing like wildfire. That's what a process can teach you. And so we had done that in the past, Clint, so that we had an idea of our own value and what the market would say. So we didn't feel a compelling need to have to rerun and re-rack it. I don't know that's always the case. In businesses that are highly marketable, I think you probably have to almost create competition to maximize your opportunity. But, for us in our space, in the industry, and the fragmentation, part of the issue was our size versus the number of buyers, because we were, in the top end of the market space from a size perspective. So every deal is a little bit different when it comes to what advice I got on that. But we did actually have a banker work through a process, had a couple other interested private equity firms that definitely wanted to talk us into doing that versus, exiting with a merger. So we could have done that, but we chose the strategic route.
What were the biggest surprises, or was there any point where you're just like exhausted and you're like, this isn't going to happen? I feel like every deal dies once or twice, or was it just like once you decided and started talking, just start figuring it out?
Well, Patrick, I think once or twice is probably low. If it doesn't die 3 or 4 times, then it's not actually going to happen.
Yeah.
And it really tests your nerves and your commitment to it. So, looking back on the process, I think the folks at Hibu were very honest and had good integrity, but they were tough. It's not like, no good business deal is going to be easy, when you're talking about the sizes we're talking about. But at the end of the day, you have to gird your loins, as they say, be ready, put your armor on, because if you go into the process and you sign a LOI and you're going to go through diligence, it's a sprint that feels like 20-hour days for 3 months.
Right.
So for me, it was exhausting. For our team, it was probably even more exhausting for my CFO and team. We had to rally the group to make sure.
You're 2 months post-close, or when did you close?
August. So we're coming up on 4.
Okay. So this is a great time to ask this question. There's a little bit of debate on what is more stressful, due diligence or integration post-closing. So you felt the last few months of a deal, I know that phase very well. Sometimes it just feels like a wrestling match that's never going to end.
So true.
I feel like half the time I'm wrestling a panther and just trying to make it tap out in the ring for it to just close, just to get across the freaking finish line and close. And it's very stressful. It's stressful on the owners. It's stressful on the bankers, the buyers, everybody. But then the other side of the deal, I don't get as much of a view into, because I typically am sailing on to the next one a lot of times, and they're
Right.
working through that transition. But I hear the transition can be, stressful too, because you've got those potential employees that are infected by this, and all the conversations that need to happen, and all the what does this mean for me, and how are we going to do this that needs to happen with all these people that were maybe not in the loop during all that the deal phase. So like, give me a compare and contrast to like your mental state and the stress levels, like let's say the last 3 or 4 months, and then the 3 months before that, prior to closing. How would you compare them?
The 3 months before closing were much tougher. I think it can go the other way really fast, and I can see that if you're doing an asset sale, or you're going to have to shut down certain parts or discontinue lines of business, that just gets much more difficult because more people are negatively impacted. We're really fortunate in this particular situation where we were able to partner as a merger with just very few people being directly impacted. Everyone's impacted. So when I say directly, meaning positions eliminated and actually having to go find another job because of the merger. So that was, for us, 20 people out of 400. Other folks can choose to move on their own, which they have, but they have job opportunity and they still are gainfully employed. So there's less of the, this is really, really bad. I think mergers have a really bad name for most employees. It scares the crap out of them, right? And we had 6 weeks of uncertainty, from the time we announced until we started talking about what the plan for integration was, because we moved the deal quickly through the diligence process and then had to start planning an integration. So that 6 weeks was tough, but fortunately, the partnership we've had with Hibu and RevLocal is to really treat people with honesty and integrity. And they don't make false promises. They don't surprise people. They give them warning. And if there's going to be a change, and they also give them an opportunity to be trained into the new role. So I think that it's been hard for our team. So it's probably because I'm more in an advisory role and not necessarily carrying. It's the weight of it is much heavier on our team. So I think they would tell you it's much harder than it was pre-close for sure, because they're having to learn new systems, new processes, and new ways. And so, but I think if the partner is the right partner and you're doing it for the right reasons, then I think it's worth it. And from my perspective as a whole, notwithstanding some of the challenges individuals have, it's been good and it's been manageable to this point.
So the integration sucks, by the way, always. But the nitty gritty of this is all the clients will move on to the Hibu products, and then it's like all the sales are on a different internal tracking, all the billing switched over, like everything.
Yeah.
Has to switch.
Yeah, because at the end, you run side by side for a while, and then you realize that's an inefficient model. And if the product set is better on one side than the other, is more expansive, then eventually you need to move people over at the time the customers are ready to move over. So doing it in a manageable, organized, less chaotic way is the process. So it'll take us another 6 months, to really do a good job of it. But keeping the clients in mind and trying not to lose track of clients in the process is with the size we're at, it's not simple, and it's complex. But the end goal and the end value to our clients is going to be real. They're getting a better solution that has better value than what we were able to provide. I believe that, or I wouldn't go through this process.
That was one of my other questions. So clearly RevLocal has better sales reps. I mean, there's no question about that. Like, we're truly world-class, I think.
We've always believed that, and that's why we grew. Yeah.
So congrats, Hibu. You got a world-class sales team. But what have you learned? Like, what do they do well? What's the difference with the product?
I think from a product perspective, it's more integrated. They had a different, we grew from a startup upwards. And so you're constantly trying to fight the battle of revenue growth and technology growth. It's a constant, balancing act where you're investing for growth. They came from being a larger organization that really developed their technology into the digital space, coming from a publishing world. So they had a little bit of a leg up when it comes to the level of investment they were able to make. So I think the integration of their products and the visibility and the trackability is at another level than what ours had been, even though we kept investing in it and trying to keep up. As part of the train that we saw was we're going to have to just keep spending and spending and spending. It's just hard to get ahead of it, especially when the market moves. So that part is definitely true. And I think also just knowing and being very disciplined. One of the phrases I've used with our team is they had more discipline than we had, meaning that we were always supporting this growth engine and always trying to give people more flexibility to take on whatever customers they wanted to take on, or to sell it in the way that was most comfortable for them. There's more discipline. And, this is the kind of client we can really serve well. Let's not make a promise to somebody we won't serve well. If there's an industry that we really don't do that great, then let's not chase them as hard, or let's not be as loose with our sales process. So I think that's actually good because it leads to happier customers and an easier way to serve customers, because you're serving the ones that are going to stick around and are getting the greatest value. So those kinds of disciplines in both process and approach, and in the way that they go about the sales process, I think have been really good for our teams. It's just a matter of getting them learned and getting into their rhythm.
Mm-hmm. So specifically, what does that mean? Like, go sell the plumber in a big city versus like the florist in a small suburb kind of thing? Yeah,
you more specific. There's a lot more to it than just that. They certainly pay attention to the verticals that really do well with digital marketing and have those in your, and they'll provide that data. But then it's also the level of data. How old is the business? What's their level of engagement? What's their level of spend that they already have? And so there's a lot more, we do it the best. So let's find those who are trying to do it and let's show them how to do it better. So when you look at the universe of 30 million businesses, it's really hard to distill it down to who are those 500,000 or 1 million that are your ideal customer.
Yeah.
And so for us, that was a much more difficult, expensive thing to try to figure out. So you tend to have a lot of trial and error with customers that may or may not fit. So I think when you look at their approach, it's just much more intelligent and disciplined to say, well, here is the swath of customers we really think really fit us well, and let's go be great for them. Like be the best in these industries and really be real in that. And I think, we did that well, Patrick. There's no doubt we were winning against most of our competition, but I think there's another level that we wanted to achieve. And I think this can help us do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there operations in verticals like RevLocal was?
From not directly, no.
Got it.
There's expertises, that are directly tied to it, but it's not, it's too big for just setting aside the whole team.
I debate that with our accounting team. Honestly, now I think of like how there was an education pod and home services
we
pod.
kind of shifted away from it, Patrick, during COVID. We shifted away from it a bit because it really wasn't realistic that it's not the most efficient, and there's a lot of cousins, meaning industries that are a lot alike. And so you don't need to stay in one, and you can start to pair them up. And I think it also helps business owners to learn from other industries, and if you're not just one single focus. So it's catch-22,
Yeah. So now that you're here on the other side of a transaction, I don't think RevLocal didn't do any acquisitions, right?
No.
Okay. Do you think about that? Like, hey, what if we would have like acquired $1 million or $2 million or $3 million here and there at, one sweep rather than just, scrap for it one day at a time? Have you thought?
I looked at them all the time, Patrick. So I never saw anything that really got me excited. I literally looked at them all the time.
Okay.
Oh yeah, all the time. The reality of it is when you're acquiring a smaller business that doesn't go to market the same way, doesn't actually look at business the same way, maybe more about being creative. When you think about the fragmented marketing world, there were only a few of us who were really focused on saying, this is how we want to serve the digital marketing landscape. This is the part of the marketing wheel that we think is most valuable. Many others might be caught up in design or web or social, thinking that is the greatest way to serve a customer, new prospects. Whereas we had a little different angle, as you know. And I think many of the ones that we would look at would take us in a whole other direction where you're trying to be too many things. So you don't do anything well. And so that was just the nature of the fragmentation of the market and how people approached it. So we always found that our best acquisition was new customer acquisition with better salespeople. And that's why we approached it the way we did. Our acquisition strategy was going out and taking those customers from our competitors through great salesmanship and services.
And are they in similar cities? Like RevLocal's big in Houston, San Diego, Columbus, like was it similar geography?
Yeah. There was not a lot of overlap or redundancy where we couldn't continue to serve in those cities. But they're definitely they're in many more because their sales force was much bigger than ours. So, they're definitely in more cities, but it gives more opportunity for our folks. And we're only a fraction of the way to what the goal is and what we see the opportunity to be. So there's a lot of runway left for RevLocal and Hibu to run together. And that's why this is such an important time to do it. Yeah. As we used to say, Patrick, it's a race. And there's a race to be this most dominant digital marketing provider. And I think Hibu / RevLocal right now, and Hibu can be that in the coming years. Somebody's got to be the best. Why not be us?
Might as well be you, right?
That's right.
What does this mean, personally to you on the other side of this deal? Like, how is your life different, if any? And then like, what does it mean for your thinking, like about your next chapter? We didn't really quite do that forward-looking look here. I assume on a deal of this size, where you're north of 50 million revenue, that you're committed for a bit. Like you're going to be around assisting, helping them succeed together. But is this, do you have a timeline in mind of like how long you're going to be around? Like, or are you planning a second act? Does this change your life right now already? Like, tell me a little bit about these things.
Well, the only thing I would say is, no, I don't know what it's going to be. I want to be committed here and not have my eyes too much distracted other places for at least the next year. What I do know about my own personality and what I know about my family's personality is we can't go sit on a beach and wait on a bus to come. Mm-hmm. That's just not our wiring. But, The reasons I would do things would be not as much, like you said earlier, it's not as much for paying for kids' college. It's not as much for, trying to succeed here. It's more about now my kids, my family. I have sons and daughters that, teaching them small business ownership is one of the things that's been on my mind most recently. I think I need to understand the power of being a business owner and, meaning the difference you can make and the ability, the flexibility you have. When I say power, I mean power over your own life. Like you have the ability to work 20 hours and you have the ability to be with your kids when there's a ball game. My dad taught me that. And like, that's in the fiber of my being. During the holidays, I noticed that with all my brothers, like we're all thinking that way. And so, but it's hard to do it. And you got to learn certain disciplines and muscles. You got to strengthen certain muscles to be able to handle the weight of that. And so the only reflection I've had is it's nice to not have the weight of what are we doing and missing and waking up in the middle of the night to say, oh crap, forgetting to do this, or we need to invest there, or that's not going well and I need to figure that out. Other people's great minds are working on that. Now mine's more about just trying to support people and encourage them and try not to get in the way, trying to tell people what they're doing wrong or think I can do it better, because I know that's not true. So it's different because I'm in a support role versus the challenger. I'm the phrase of being the entrepreneur that I have to initiate it. I'm not the initiator now. I'm more of the supporter. And that's just not the way I've been for 20 years, but for a period I'll be that way. And I think I'll probably find something pop up to say, you know what, you should go try to tackle that problem. So at 55 years old, I'm certainly not done yet.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is a year from now, after becoming one of the biggest marketing small business solutions, you're maybe thinking accounting.
Yeah, that's right. That's where I started at, Patrick. You never know.
Let's get the band back together,
That's right. That's right. I started as a public accountant at Ernst & Young. There's no doubt. There's a lot of need for good accounting firms. There's no doubt about that, especially now. Yeah. You're in a good space.
All right. I noticed the bookshelf behind you full of books. Are you a reader? Drop us a top. I like the thought of you having kids and grandkids, and you're trying to get them in the mindset of they need to understand this. They need to understand the power of small business ownership. If there's one or two books you're like, I hope I can get my grandkids to read these books someday, what would those top 2 or 3 be?
Well, if they'd listen, I'd pay them to read them, but they don't always listen. The grandkids are too young to be able to do that. It's just my own kids I'm still trying to pay to read certain books. If there's anything I could say to anyone, and I say it to young people all the time, I heard this, and I probably said it to you, Patrick, that you're going to be the same person 5 years from now as you are today, except for the books you read and the people you meet. So pay very close attention to what you're reading and who you're hanging out with. Can't always choose your family, but you can choose your business associates and where your work is. And so if you're in a C situation and you're an A player, find an A situation. If you want to be an entrepreneur and you're working for somebody else, take your lessons and go do it. Patrick, you did that. Kudos. And people need to have the courage, because we're in such a blessed country to be able to do that. And so when I think back to the fundamental things, the books that I try to pay my kids to read are like the Dale Carnegie books, How to Win Friends and Influence People. What are your habits of smiling, using people's name, and being connected to people? Some of those fundamental, have a power of positive thinking. The stuff, Patrick and I both sold books at one point in our careers, very different generations, but learning to be able to control your space between your ears and your attitude, and like the whole comments of life is 10% what happens and 90% how you react. There's a skill to be developed there. And if you're a business owner, you have to develop that skill or you won't survive. And so when I think about great books, it's Carnegie. It's, some of my more recent favorites are Jocko Willink's, Extreme Ownership. You own your own square footage, and everything Patrick Lencioni. If there's any business owner on here who has any team, read any and all of the 12, 13 books now that Patrick Lencioni has. Lencioni, however you say his last name. Yeah. He starts with the 5 dysfunctions of a team. I still lean on that, Patrick, 10 years later, building the trust with the team so that you can have conflict. If your team is not arguing with you as a leader, then you don't have a good team. They don't care. You have to create an environment where they trust you enough and you trust them enough to have a conflict on a regular basis so that you can get the commitment and the, go right up the pyramid to being able to pay attention to results. So some of those are once you're in, but I think to your point, Clint, I think people have to really build those base skills. And I have a 35-year-old son and a 23-year-old son who's graduating in 10 days from Ohio State. So trust me, he started hearing it, but you still have to do it. At the end of the day, you got to read the books, you got to learn the lessons, and then go put them in practice in different places.
Cool.
This has been a really fun conversation to, reflect with you and just put a bow on the, this story of this successful exit and merger. And congratulations. And it's just energizing to catch up and talk about what you all built and what the future is for the team there, and also, just some of those fundamentals of success and worrying about your own execution rather than competitors. So, this has been great. So, Marc, if people want to connect with you online, where should they do that? Is that LinkedIn, or what should we link to?
LinkedIn's the best place. Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn. Marc with the C, Hawk, H-A-V. That's what I would say. So,
right.
Yeah. And you can catch me there on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message. I'd be happy to support anybody that I can, help them be successful in any way. So I hope this has been helpful, Patrick. I want to say thank you to you, Patrick. I would always say yes to anything you're doing, because, Patrick, we wouldn't be where we were, have the success we did, if you hadn't come in as a 24. How old were you? 24 years old at the time?
I was 20. Yeah, 24.
Just turned 24. And the things that you were able to accomplish in the 7 years that you helped us grow and build, I think we both grew together during that. Mm-hmm. And so the things that you're doing now with other business owners, you have great wisdom and great experiences, Patrick, that are built around being a successful, integrity-driven guy. So I'm proud to see you having the success you had, and happy to spend some time with you.
Thanks, man. A lot of it was learned there, so much appreciated. So good to see you, Marc.
Yeah, you too, Patrick. Clint, nice to talk with you.
Yeah, very nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Take care, guys.